everybody. Welcome back to AI Diatribe. My name is Jason Lowe. You can call me J-Lowe, and I am your host. And today we have a rather interesting subject to discuss. We're going to talk about AI and cybersecurity and how AI is evolving in the cybersecurity space. There's a lot to talk about here because this is something that a lot of people are really interested in. A lot of people have asked me about. And so the two people I have with me today are Mr. Trevor Burnside, once again joining me. And by the way, for qualifications, everyone needs to know he did get his master's in cybersecurity management from the University of
Best school in Utah.
Best school. And also, incidentally, he understands criminals a little better because he also got his bachelor's in criminal justice. So this guy knows the bad guys and he knows how to stop them. And then also joining me is Mr. Jason Kaufman. Love your first name, as always. Who, by the way, has all of the things. Man, he's got all of the initials after his name. CISSP, CISM, CCSP. He's also got a bachelor's in information technology and another bachelor's that we're not going to discuss, but I want to point out that he's got academic discipline because he has two bachelors. So I am joined by two very, very intelligent and qualified gentlemen. Welcome, guys. Let's dive into this right away. So let's talk a little bit about what things are like right now. A lot of people are kind of vague and ambiguous as to how AI is being used, what the threats are and stuff. So let's start talking about this. How has artificial intelligence really influenced what's going on in the cybersecurity space over the last few years? Is it kind of more of a threat, or is it more of a solution, or is it both? Mr. Kaufman, what do you think?
It's definitely both. It's accelerating the need for a rapid response, also tooling to assist new SOC analysts within a SOC team. But the growing threat of the threat actors learning how to leverage generative AI to sound more believable, sound more human, sound more relevant. All the information they could get at the click of a button rather than having to spend time to do all their due diligence. They can just do it just now with a single script, and just like you're going into ChatGPT, hey, give me information on Trevor Burnside and everything that he knows and how he talks, and then write me an email on this and send it to Jason and say, hey, you're getting free coffee or something out of this, or free Chipotle if you really want to know how to scam me.
Chipotle.
But it's the constant fight on, hey, they're advancing these attacks so much better and getting much more efficient with it. But now we have to defend against all of it and learn how to leverage AI to combat AI. I think we're in the middle of that, but then also we're having an issue with architecture to where people are overpromising on what their capabilities are with AI and starting to rely more on it when they should keep that human in the loop.
Interesting. So you're saying that it's a little bit less of a, hey, let's have AI go out and do pen tests and try and find these different threats and these different exploits, and it's more social engineering is kind of how AI is being used primarily right now. Is that what you're saying?
It's easier to hack a human than it is to hack a network. So the autonomous penetration testing, the vulnerability scanning piece of it, aligning with the MITRE ATT&CK framework, doing all that stuff autonomously without the need of a human to be any part of this besides enter some form of IP addressing or a domain or something like that. That is the way they generally try to scope out a network. But a lot of these times, the networks are a lot more locked down than somebody who already has authentication into something and has access into certain proprietary confidential information. It's much easier to overcome human error than it is a missed patch on a network because people are getting really good at patching their networks for the most part.
Yeah, and along those lines, right, from an architecture perspective, I talk to businesses all the time that ask me, at least on cybersecurity, of, hey, when is AI going to be added into cybersecurity tools from Blue Team perspective? And I'm always like, what are you talking about? It's available right now. Like, you can buy stuff right now, leveraging AI ML to protect or add to your security posture.
And for those that are unfamiliar with the term Blue Team, can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. High level, in cybersecurity, we're talking about red team, blue team. Red team for the most part are attacking networks, and the blue team are defenders, right? So if I'm a business and I've got a CISO, I've got a security team, I've got security engineers, analysts, that's the blue team, right? That are protecting my network against external threats. But those tools are available right now. And conversely as well, the bad guys are using LLMs, using AI, AIML to create malicious code, write code, to Jason's point, right? Those create social engineering attempts with recorded voice, things like that. That's happening right now. It's not future state.
So how do we fight it? How do we utilize AI right now to fight it, Trev?
So someone told me a couple weeks ago, actually, I thought it was interesting. It sounds a little cliche, but the whole fight fire with fire. To fight AI, you need to use AI, right? There's some tools out there that exist right now as far as AI detecting AI. So if I'm a blue team or I'm a security analyst or otherwise, there's tools that I can leverage that can detect phishing attempts using AI, right? That can determine some of that kind of stuff from a social engineering that maybe I, as a human, wouldn't be able to detect.
Did you miss anything, Jason? What else is out there?
I think the biggest thing that is changing is the expansion on the user awareness training. So teaching how to recognize something that sounds fishy. Even if I'm on a video webinar and somebody's using a bot in order or an avatar to do some deep fake of Trevor talking to me and asking me to send him some money somewhere, or hey, send me $50 and I'll send you $100 Chipotle gift card. It's much more believable now when you're actually seeing the person and talking to them live or on a phone call even. And so having that training and to where you're having that reaction to where you're not believing everything that you're hearing, even if you're physically seeing the person and talking to them, interacting with them, other ways to validate that person is really who they say they are. The whole validation that we're seeing now with a lot of like banks and credit union industries that know your customers, same thing as know the person that you're talking to, and either pick up another form of communication like your cell phone and call them directly, or something other than the avenue that you're talking to them now to verify that they are who they say they are and that the request is real. There's a lot of use cases that I deal with day in and day out where people are sending hundreds of thousands of dollars because they think it's really the CEO that they're talking to every day at 8:30 a.m. right when they start. So we're seeing a big expansion on that. Another one is exactly what Trevor was saying, fighting fire with fire. AI can react a lot faster than a human can. So the incident response and after the detection happens, how do you immediately contain it and how do you start the remediation process automatically without a human having to wake up at 3 a.m. to get out of bed and start doing their due diligence? You got to have something that's automatically reacting on their behalf so you minimize the impact of whatever breach or malware, whatever it is. Having that AI stand in and do that front level is very important. AI can't do everything, especially in the AI SOC. So if somebody promises you the AI can do everything, be a little hesitant on that. But it is a great area to where you're rapidly responding to something, but still keeping that human in the loop to come in and finish the task.
Well, but let's talk a little bit about that incident response and other areas where it's being used right now. AI is now being used, much like it's used in every other industry as it relates to cybersecurity, to make things a little more easy and a little more efficient for people that are on the front lines. It's making it so you can be a little bit more of a strategy or, a strategist. Is that even a word? I don't even know. But the point being is, are we in danger of, because cybersecurity is so important, are we in danger of becoming a little bit too dependent on AI to do these things with me? I mean, of all of the different disciplines and functional areas of a company, cybersecurity is the one that's quite frankly, pretty darn important. And so is this something we really want to trust completely to AI?
My response to that would actually be a little bit different in the sense you look at, going back to that blue team. If you go on LinkedIn, you go on Jobs or Indeed or whatever, you look at the qualifications that businesses are requiring from cybersecurity leaders. You got to be doing this for 10 years. You have to have a CISSP. You have to have a master's degree. You have to have this. You have to have this before they'll consider you. And then you look at hackers, bad guys. All it takes is an internet connection and a can-do attitude, right? The risk that hackers pose is that they can work autonomously. They work at night and they are crafty and they can do whatever they want to do. And you look at blue team and it's just structure, bureaucracy. If we don't rely on AI to combat our structure, I think we're going to lose in the end because the bad guys with AI are just going to iterate around us all day.
I agree with that, but there's something that's also being missed is the part of heavy reliance on something that you don't have any control over. So a lot of the times, like we get requests, somebody's like, "Hey, we need a software application that can do this for us, that can do everything that a human can do." And a lot of companies out there, if you go to Google and you start typing in, "Hey, I need an application that can do this, this, and this," and that whole coming back to that AI SOC. Something that's going to layer on all the different applications, whether it's an endpoint detection, it's a network detection, a SIM tooling, something that's going to layer on top of that to do that automatic detection, and then the incident response piece of it. Everybody's relying heavily on this software application, but now we're seeing a lot of these tool sets to where If you're familiar with like the CrowdStrikes, the Sentinel-1s, the Microsoft Defenders, the Cynets, if you go to Gartner Magic Quadrant and seeing these endpoint tools that are the leaders in the industry, they still have a gap to where they're having issues with what's called like the EDR killer. So it's just one example on something that can escalate past what this application has access to in the operating system, get into the kernel level, and actually override any capabilities that this EDR has by just disabling it. So that is what the malware is being trained to do now. So you can't be 100% reliant on something that you don't have a human watching this or multiple points of telemetry seeing all this stuff happen, because you're going to ultimately let something in and you're not going to know what to do to protect yourself or remediate past that. It's just like going into ChatGPT and saying, hey, who's better, University of Utah or University of Florida? And if it says University of Utah, that is a hallucination 100% of the time. So it's using that type of example, but in the security sense. Security, if you have a hallucination or something that's missed that should be autonomous, what are you going to do if you don't have resources to back that up?
That's a fair point, except the point about the universities. We'll let that slide because I'm trying to be nice to you today. You know what's funny is during that discussion, and Trevor, I think you'll understand the relevance here. When you were talking about the blue team being so structured and being very rigid and in a box versus those that are actually assaulting being very fluid and being very opportunistic, the thing that reminded me of was wartime tactics when soldiers actually started using camouflage and not just lining up, lowering their rifles and trying to shoot the guy in the red uniform versus somebody in a blue uniform type of a thing. These hackers are in camouflage. They are hitting us from the trees. They're hitting us from the bushes. They're doing all of this stuff. And it seems like cybersecurity management and maybe even the structure of blue teams might be like the British regulars that are just kind of marching forward thinking it's still traditional wartime tactics when it's not. Thoughts? Am I off? Am I crazy?
No, I don't think you're crazy. You bring up good points, right? The problem is, from an offensive perspective, is you really have to have rules and authority to be able to do offensive cyber operations against targets. FBI, right? Criminal justice authorities that have that jurisdiction to go after online criminals are the ones that we really rely on to do that offensive action. And if I'm a business, the only thing I can do is kind of batten down the hatches and wait to respond. When it's kind of a bad place to be. That's where you get a lot of that burnout, a lot of people that are done with the industry just because, because
they're too busy playing defense all the time.
And it's not a winning game. You don't really gain yards, right? You're just kind of holding it down the fort, hoping you get enough budget, for next year to add the next software thing that's going to protect us 80%, but we still have that 20% that's keeping us awake at night, that we're coming in on the weekends and at nights trying to patch and fix. And there's a lot of burnout because of that kind of stuff.
If you don't mind, let me ask you, just take a different perspective on that question. Were you thinking in more of AI as enablement for a threat actor? Camouflage, enabling maybe a lesser soldier in order to be more effective because now they're camouflaged into the environment. So somebody that probably could have normally provided some form of defense there or attack, they weren't able to be as effective because they didn't see that person. So it could have been more of a lucky shot. Is that where you're coming from? Is more of an enablement of a threat actor?
No, kind of more of a judgment of, how I see in context what you're saying there about being defense. And in wartime, soldiers are being offense just as much as they are being defense. And we're just, with the analogy, the wartime analogy would apply to you is people hunkering down behind shields while people are trying to pick them off with arrows and they don't have bows to shoot any arrows back. That's kind of what it feels like to me. But where I was going with the analogy is, a battle plan is perfect until the first shot is fired. And then the whole thing just goes to crap. And it always will. And so what you need is strategic leadership that is able to recognize what's actually happening on the battlefield and adapt the battlefield tactics. And this is why, when that transition went from uniformed officers to camouflaged officers, those armies that stuck to the uniform officers paradigm out of pride, and this is the way we always did it, and I'm wearing the red coat because I'm representing my country and all of this stuff, they were still getting killed. The people that were in charge of strategy, look at what the opponent is doing that is effective, and let's try and either fight fire with fire like you said in this way, or adapt different tactics so that we could possibly go on the offensive the same way. And maybe instead of shooting them in the face, let's blow up the bridge that they're coming across to try and get to us, that sort of thing.
Well, you brought up a good point. In the Army, or at least in the military, from my experience, what I did on deployment or I did in the military, I had trained and done dozens and dozens and dozens of times before I actually ended up using it in any type of real environment. And that should be what we're doing in cybersecurity. We should be doing tabletop exercises, using those pen tests to get findings, and then not just checking a box from a compliance perspective or a third-party vendor risk management sheet. We should be actually going through the motions of tabletop exercise and saying, okay, if this were to happen, what would I do? What does my boss do? What does their boss do? And actually go through and play that stuff, because it's going to happen. And when it does, we want it to be, the 12th time that we've done this, and it's clockwork instead of everyone running around with their heads on fire.
Well, that's interesting. Did you know that 45% of cybersecurity professionals, 45%, feel unprepared for AI-powered threats? Despite the fact that there have been so many AI advancements, they feel completely unprepared. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe they got to do a little bit of prep work. Who knows?
I would
Well,
say that number's probably a little low even. But
yeah,
I bet a lot of people didn't admit it.
Well, and the stuff is picking up, right? I mean, last year, automated scanning activities went to 36,000 scans per second globally. That's a 16.7% increase year over year. Phishing emails, we talked about social engineering. Phishing emails have skyrocketed by 1,265%, and credential phishing incidents have grown by 967% since late 2022. And a lot of that is driven by the fact that it is more effective now because they're able to use AI to more effectively do some social engineering. So I think we've laid the groundwork here. Things are dangerous. Things are, especially more from a social aspect or a social engineering aspect and a people attack versus a systems attack. But do we have any success or use cases that we can cite and take a look at as something that this worked? This is how we were able to use AI to fight off an AI attack, or some other means to fight off an AI attack. Are you guys, either of you, do you have any of those types of use cases?
I'll say something that's really common now, that we're seeing really across carriers, across vendors, is that AI SOC enablement of, I talked about burnout a little bit of, lots of false positives on using, we're adding all these tools, we're doing the right things. They're creating a ton of noise. And me as a security analyst, all I do all day is approve false positives because and that's my job now. There's a high level of burnouts because of those false positives. Things aren't tuned right. And even when they are tuned right, there's just reports or alerts every single day that we could just, if I got rid of these, I'd have most of my day back. And AI is doing that now. Across the board, we're seeing alert fatigue going down, false positives being reduced because of AI ML. Jason talked about CrowdStrike, SentinelOne. A lot of these leading EDR, MDR vendors are at the forefront of adopting AI.
One of the big ones I'm seeing is we're getting a ton more requests for DDoS protection because of how AI is being leveraged to create a botnet. So it's leveraging an LLM to go out and establish malware to create a botnet, and then when an attacker is ready to find a target and we want to remove any access to any of their resources or something like that, whatever they want to do, and we're seeing a ton to where there's locking down infrastructure by using a DDoS attack. And I think that's one of the biggest ones that we're seeing a ton of requests for. I think the insurance game is saying, hey, you not only have to have MFA before, but now you have to get DDoS protection. We're actually having some big e-commerce sites that are actually using multiple DDoS protection, multiple DDoS mitigation companies, because they're not 100% confident in one of them. And now we're still seeing, Trevor, what was that one that we just saw recently? It was like 6.5 terabits per second or something like that they were able to field off successfully without any downtime. So it's things like that we're probably going to see more and more, and we're probably going to see that stretch and get closer to the 10 terabits and that type of stuff. But we're seeing a ton of engagement because that's one of the biggest fears from AI is just not a physical breach of somebody threatening to extort or exfiltrate information, but just not have access to systems, because that is also a part of cybersecurity. It's not just about the data being leaked out, but also access to the resources that need to continue business. And that's what I'm seeing consistently.
Maybe you were going to say something.
Yeah, just to Jason's point on that DDoS attack, almost a high watermark as far as largest DDoS attack ever recorded. Not as quite that high as from an all-timer, but certainly up there. So things aren't slowing down at all.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. I think it's quite interesting to think about the ethical implications of using AI with protective measures, because here, at least in the United States, people have rights and they cannot be surveilled unless there's sufficient reason. They can't have their phone lines tapped. They can't have, different things like that happening unless there actually is justifiable reason to do so. But now we're talking about situations with the flow of information where it might be worthwhile to make sure that things are being surveilled quite heavily. So the question is, can AI-driven surveillance be justified in the name of security, or does that infringe on privacy rights?
I think it's a question from safeguards as far as if I put safeguards in place with AI, can it break the law? Can it get around those safeguards? And that's really the question. I mean, the last 5 years, we've really pushed, zero trust really across the board, whether that's employees, systems, access to anything really. It's a hard conversation in adopting AI when you run into that zero trust model, because now do I have to give up some of that trust to something that I don't have control over? And that's really a question that we're sitting at right now on AI adoption and security.
So that begs the question then, do we need some sort of a regulatory framework around the use of AI in cybersecurity?
I definitely think so. I mean, right now, there's a lot of protection on privacy and individuality, all that stuff. That's why we're seeing a lot of acquisitions that are just for the synthetic data in order to train certain models, because you can't use real life data on that because you have the identifiable information that goes into a lot of these LLMs. So the same thing applies for any use case that somebody would leverage to do any type of surveying or anything like that, is because you have to figure out some way to mask that data and keep somebody's anonymity as part of the results. And so, I mean, it's all about what Trevor is saying, keeping those safeguards, but knowing what safeguards to apply, what protections are actually needed for the individual. People do have the right to be forgotten. They do have the right to, know where their, where their data is, with data about them, and they have the right to say, hey, I don't want any of this to be done. But how do you have something like that to where most of these companies don't even know what the machine learning model underneath them is actually physically doing? I mean, a lot of them have even gone on record saying, hey, it'd be way more expensive to actually dig into this and know what this large language model is physically thinking and report on it than it is to just pay people off if it becomes an issue from a lawsuit. So from the resources required to do all this stuff, I mean, we're still seeing, not only people are talking about different frameworks and different laws and all this stuff, but also a lot of these companies are still doing that fiduciary responsibility to saying, hey, should we actually abide by this, or should we just take the hit whenever it comes up? That's why we're still seeing a ton of lawsuits with Meta and Google everywhere, because they determined, hey, it's not worth our time to actually, abide by most of the stuff, even though we're going to preach it to the world and have frameworks and, classes on all this stuff. I think we're going to see that continued challenge on what should be done and what people are actually doing.
Okay, so good points. Very, very good points. I too sure hope that we're going to have something in place that's going to allow this to be regulated. How that's going to happen, I don't know. I mean, because we're in a multinational society, how is this going to be applied unilaterally? It's just not. So there's dangers to trying to regulate certain behaviors that, if those behaviors were unregulated, they might be able to be used to defend against the unregulated behavior of other offensive nation states. If I'm going into a battle and honor says that I have one arm tied behind my back and I have my sword in my hand, but because I have the other arm tied behind my back, I don't have a shield, and I walk down in the arena, and the next thing you know, despite the agreement, the soldier coming at me has a sword and a shield. Well, crud, what do I do here? How do I defend myself? It's like you're constraining yourself. Is the regulatory framework thing going to have some sort of a similar effect? Do we need to be liberal with it because we can't apply it multinationally? Or is it something where we have to try and do the right thing because it's the right and honorable thing to do?
Well, I think the analogy is correct. And in the sense, AI is an arms race in every sense of the word. I think putting regulations in is going to benefit everybody because of the capabilities that AI can pose to everyone. It's overarching. It's beyond just privacy laws.
in agreement to that. But there's also the different political ideologies by country. So if you're looking at any of the countries in Europe, if you're looking at the USA, if you're looking at any country that respects individual privacy laws, that respects human rights, and all that stuff, there needs to be a framework, and it's going to be followed by certain countries. But if you're looking at, the CCP, or you're looking at Russia, you're looking at threat actors, you're still going to have issues to where any LLM that is enabled in China right now has to follow 10,000 questions that are required that it cannot answer about the CCP. So if they're already regulating what type of responses are going to happen, I don't think they're going to really play with whatever framework that's enabled internationally. So I think that's going to be just like, a lot of the other treaties that are happening. Certain countries are going to follow certain things and other countries are not. But then also the threat actors, it's going to be the wild, wild west. They don't really care. They're going to privatize everything. And then they're just going to let that thing run free. And it's not going to have any respect to any of that stuff. So I think we're going to see multiple approaches, and it's actually going to get probably pretty interesting on how this is all going to shape out, because I think it's going to cause some conflicts.
I would agree. So let's move into a little bit more of a future looking position now. Let's start talking about what we think is going to happen. And I'm particularly interested in both your opinions on this. Where do you think AI is going to have a more significant effect over the next 1 to maybe even 5 years? What type of effect are we going to see?
Terminators.
Besides that,
I was kidding.
because I'm building one in my closet right now.
No, I really think the autonomous the robotics is going to be a lot bigger, because right now we're specializing in a lot of things software wise, but you still can't interact with virtual it's what is it? I studied the virtual reality, augmented reality, but there's another one, virtuosity or something like that. So the one thing I think we're going to expand is leveraging all the AI and ML and all the different multimodal things, computer vision, the generative AI, all that stuff, but into bipedal, humans to do a lot of the supply chain stuff that we're starting to see with Tesla and Amazon, but we're going to see that in a wide scale with residential usage. And also it's going to expand into physical security. We actually do have robotic dogs now that we can mess with. That's a fun fact. So I think we're going to expand on what the real world capabilities are. And by that, I mean robotics. And then also how we're going to see the chain of thought expand into the progression into AGI.
By the way, the term you were looking for is augmented reality-based robot programming, or ARRP, sometimes referred to as AR-based robot training.
Okay.
But you're right. I mean, that's a whole different subject, right? We're going to have to do a roundtable in the future about robotics, because we're talking about digital intelligence that can affect the cyber world and indirectly affect the real world. But when we're talking about robotics, now you're talking about an actual tangible physical entity that can walk down the street and kick a dog, or, something a little bit more drastic than that.
You're extending the data capabilities of AI by giving it something in the real world to go get data or act on behalf of something. You're removing any limitations that it has now by being on a server or something somewhere.
So how do we keep humans involved? Since things are developing so rapidly, how do we make it so that humans are still involved as things become more and more pivotal, have a little bit more importance?
I think that zero trust aspect is still very important, where you really can't trust any system completely, or you shouldn't trust any system completely. And we still need humans to do those checks and balances against that agent decision making. I think one of those lower hanging fruit that I see in the next 1 to 3 years is that agentic AI playbooks and run books, as far as being able to respond faster when things go bad. And we have enough data to know what security analyst should do in certain scenarios, that we can have an agent do that, and have an AI agent basically do that response, at least the initial tier 1, tier 2 response, and then have that human come in as that tier 3 and be able to actually finish that remediation and address the issue.
Now let's shift to people that are in your position, cybersecurity professionals. How, in your opinion, do they stay relevant in the face of all of this rapid AI advancement?
I mean, you just gotta stay in the know about all the news articles, stuff coming out. Realize what's real and what's not. Challenge it. Don't believe all the hype that you're seeing. And honestly, the biggest thing is staying in front of the different threat actors and what methodologies they're using, in order to scan networks, in order to phish people, and stay on top of that as much as you can, because that stuff is changing so quickly, even in our field, to where we're consulting on this on a daily. Even though we're doing our own research, we're also getting research handed to us from the suppliers that we work with, and also a lot of the partners that are credentialed that we work with as well. We're getting all this information, but it's still tough to stay in front of. So find a way to where you can optimize the time and effort that you're spending researching and staying on top of the latest and greatest, because knowledge is going to be power, and augment that knowledge with capabilities of AI.
Trev?
Well, the thing I would say you can't do is bury your head in the sand and wait for this AI fad to go away. It's not going away. It's getting ingrained in everything we're doing. And the rules of the game are changing. The way that cybersecurity is structured is going to change. You got to stay on top of it, like what Kaufman is saying. You've got to look at the software, look at the tools, make that judgment if it's going to be a fit for you, if it's going to add value to your organization. But turning your back on it is the only thing you can't do.
That's fair. So let's kind of go in the other direction from that. If we were to try and identify one of the single most important things that companies could do right now, that they could focus on right now as it relates to AI and cybersecurity protection, what, in your opinions, would that one thing be?
One word: deepfakes. The human component is the biggest threat vector out there. Every time we look into it, being the last 4 years, it continuously has gone up. Percentage of breaches that happen because of human element that was the initial point of entry. Now they're getting much more sophisticated, to where even folks that are heavily trained on this, they're always saying, "Oh, I can never be fooled. I know enough to be dangerous." Now they're big threats, because they're overconfident in those links that they click on or the people that they talk to. I think getting educated on deepfakes and training people on that is going to be the biggest impact.
You look at the 10 largest breaches in the last fiscal year, maybe I'd say, all of those companies that were breached had endpoint detection response, had security tools in place. With how fast AI is moving, the ignorance gap from a normal knowledge worker is growing bigger and bigger, of the threats that they're facing that they don't even know about, to Kaufman's point. So that end user awareness is critical, and we got to close that ignorance gap very fast.
Hence, let's make sure that people aren't burying their head in the sand, for sure. Okay, just out of curiosity, what information sources are both of you using to stay up on current events and to keep yourself educated? Trevor, why don't we start with you?
I'm actually a big consumer of podcasts, so I'm always listening to podcasts, seeing what thought leaders in cybersecurity are saying, what they're seeing, and then the news with TLDR, some of the sites that all they do every day is push out most relevant information. I try to stay on top of those, but it's a lot of information every single day, and it does feel like a treadmill that's just at 10 and you can't get off.
I'm going to 100% agree with TLDR. I've signed up for every single page, because ultimately every single page has a security component on a piece of it, even though they have an InfoSec dedicated page for them. So I subscribe to that, read that daily, and then Security Weekly is probably the other biggest one that I use. It's really good for a lot of the breaches, a lot of the different tool sets that come out. And then one thing that's very important for our consulting that we do is at the end of every month, they do a previous month's acquisitions. So not only are you learning all the different tool sets, the breaches, but also who's acquiring who, why are they acquiring them, most likely from a theory perspective, or if they actually came out and said why they acquired a certain company to expand some form of their portfolio or something like that. But those are probably the big ones.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think if a lot more people actually subscribed to some of these periodic emails, daily, weekly, whatever it is, that is talking about things that are happening, not only with just cybersecurity AI, but AI in general, they would probably benefit quite well. I get asked a lot, Jason, how are you keeping up on all of this AI stuff? It's got to be driving you crazy. There is no easy answer here. You're going to spend hours a day reading stuff. And you might as well get it in the most consumable form that you can. A lot of these email updates are quite nice and do quite well. And TLDRs is definitely one that I read with regularity. But another fun channel that I use is X. I know, it's X. I'll just go on Twitter and see what's going on. Because if you follow the right people, you're going to learn about things as it's happening. Pretty neat forum for that type of stuff to happen.
Well, and honestly, with as fast as AI is moving, I mean, you can look at where we were maybe even like 6 months or a year ago, right? Not even the same landscape. The platforms like X are really the only way to keep up with it as fast as you can, because it is that breaking news, and that's as fast as AI moving, breaking information every other day.
Well, all right. I think we've had a pretty fantastic conversation about just about everything to do with cybersecurity as it relates to business. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate your expertise and willingness to be on the podcast. For those of you that are listening, if you found value in this, I've said it before, I'll say it again. You know what to do. Click all the things, like, subscribe, whatever. Make comments. Tell us what else you want us to talk about, those different types of things, and we'll make sure to do our best to address what it is that you're after. So again, thank you for both Trevor and Jason Kaufman. J-Lowe signing off and saying thanks for listening.